folks, how's it going? It's Game Webcam. Now, I realized that I haven't been uploading a whole lot of videos to this channel recently, and that's because I'm a little bit in ways with college work because I'm working on a few big projects, but in the meantime, I did try to upload videos on this channel. One of my most recent uploads to this channel was, in fact, a review short, which is just me quickly glancing over Van's World and how it plays out. If you actually want to watch that video for yourself, you can click in the top right corner for yourself. It's a quick minute video. It shouldn't take too long to watch because it's a YouTube short. There are some more bigger videos that I do want to make, such as, for example, an upcoming review video that I'm planning on making, and I also plan on making a full Roblox commentary soon. But for right now, I want to give a quick update on my whole Linux experience because it's been about 2 weeks and I'm definitely starting to get a lot more comfortable with using Linux, but I'm just not fully there yet. So the first thing that I want to say is that I've noticed that a lot of people have watched my switching to Linux video, and a lot of people from the Linux community themselves have actually made their comments on the video, and I do want to say thank you to those who are in the Linux community for helping me out on making my Linux experience better and all that sort of stuff. But of course, my change in Linux isn't made without debate. I noticed that a lot of comments on my video talk a lot about my choice of distribution and how it isn't necessarily the best choice. Because I hear a common argument that was made in the comments is that Manjaro Linux is an unstable distribution. And of course, if the Manjaro Linux is a little bit unstable, I will be making notes of any instabilities that I do come across when using the operating system. So far, the only instability that I really have noticed when using Manjaro Linux is my primary monitor just doesn't work for some reason. I think I've only encountered this once, and the main way I fixed that problem was I obviously booted to Windows, and it managed to recognize the primary monitor just fine, and then reboot into Manjaro, and of course tinker with the display settings a little to restore everything back to where it was. So, of course, some of the display drivers are a little bit finicky when updating with them, but so far I've really come across no instability issues. Hey, this is VoiceOver Game Webcam here, and I just want to make a further clarification. The reason why this display driver issue happened was because I didn't power down the operating system properly. The main reason why I powered down the PC improperly is because the entire desktop environment froze. To be honest, this was completely my fault for not configuring the power settings in advance to shut down whenever I do press the power button. So, of course, Manjaro Linux, whenever I tried to press the power button, didn't know that it was supposed to shut down. But of course, I now have configured it, so whenever I do press the power button, Manjaro knows to shut down properly. So I feel like this is definitely something that new Manjaro users should configure, so that way they can avoid this issue in the future. Whether Manjaro Linux is really unstable or not is only a question that can be answered as time progresses. I do notice a lot of other Linux users recommending me Debian-based distributions like Pop! OS, Zorin OS, Linux Mint, and all those sort of distributions, and I made it clear in my original video that I am not a fan of Debian-based distributions. While I do understand why Debian Linux and many of its derivatives are recommended to newer users of Linux because of the stability and the user-friendliness, that's not what I was looking for in a Linux distribution. I want a Linux distribution that is up to date, and obviously everything is quite centralized, and I feel like Manjaro and Arch Linux in general do quite a good job on that. All your apps are connected together with Pacman or with your third-party repositories. You could use something like Yet Another Yogurt, or Yay for short, to be able to download third-party repositories, and the AUR, which is the Arch User Repository. And the Arch User Repository is a huge appeal to me because if there is something that isn't officially supported, like by a big group or company, I could obviously rely on the Arch User Repository to be able to download software with ease. I'm very aware that Manjaro Linux and Arch Linux follow a rolling release model, which essentially means that a lot of software, along with some of the critical things like drivers and sort of all that sort of stuff, are updated as time goes along. They sort of function as their own separate entities. So far, again, I've not run into any instabilities yet or any huge issues with the operating system every time I do install updates. But just to be on the safe side, I do make snapshots in time shift before making huge updates to my packages, just to ensure that I don't brick Manjaro Linux after an update. And again, I noticed that a lot of people are trying to get me to move to Arch Linux, and don't worry, I will eventually move to Arch Linux. I am familiar with a terminal, but I'm not so familiar with a terminal as to be able to set up everything from scratch just yet. I don't think a lot of people realize that when you first start up Arch Linux for the first time, you are literally given the bare bone command line interface. You have to install all of your desktop managers, your window managers. You have to do all of that from scratch, including your drivers, and all that sort of stuff. Once I feel like I'm confident enough, I will move to Arch Linux, and I will be able to reap the full benefits of using Arch Linux. Hey guys, VoiceOver Game Webcam here again. I just want to talk about people's overall distaste for Manjaro Linux, because I've managed to receive a few comments of some people giving me a whole Bible lecture of why Manjaro Linux is obviously not the best distribution, and that's why they recommend Linux distribution XYZ. But that's the fun thing about Linux. Linux gives users the power of choice. If you are the type of person who wants their distribution to work right out of the box, there are distributions such as Pop! OS and Zorin OS that do a phenomenal job at this. However, if you are somebody who wants full control over their operating system, knowing the ins and outs of their operating system, that's why there are distributions such as Arch and Gen 2. Linux is only the kernel, and there are many different distributions that are meant to serve a variety of different purposes. What honestly baffles me is that some people act like I did not do any research when picking my distribution. I spent weeks researching many different distributions, what they did, trying them out, and there is a reason why I picked Manjaro Linux. And if Manjaro Linux isn't for you, there are many other distributions you can try, and because of Linux's versatility, you are guaranteed to find a distribution more suited to your taste. I mean, hell, you could like Hannah Montana Linux if that's what you're into. It doesn't matter what distribution people pick. If that is the distribution that makes them happy, that is an overall success for Linux. You shouldn't shame people because they didn't pick the distribution you like. I don't mind people sharing what distribution they like using and why, but you shouldn't force it upon me because it's quote-unquote a better distribution. Anyways, that's all I have to say. Let's move on to the next topic. Okay, so it's this user who recommended PhotoGIMP to me, and obviously I thought this was a very good recommendation. I am getting a little bit more familiar with the different packages and how they work. So, of course, it's always the best idea to install from the official repositories, but sometimes you do want to install a snap or a Flatpak. Now, from watching more videos in regards to like these packages, apparently the snap package is a little bit controversial because apparently due to its compression and all that sort of stuff, it runs quite slow on many distributions. And of course, it's because of this that Snap has an unfavorable reputation. But so far, I really don't experience a whole lot of issues with using Snap packages. That's probably because I am using a lightweight desktop environment, XFCE, which finally I know how those letters are arranged, so you could stop yelling at me about that. It's XFCE. I now have managed to memorize that letter order. But yeah, because I use XFCE4, I actually don't really experience that much of a performance hit. Yeah, it does take a little bit longer for the program to launch, but after that, it really isn't that much of a notable difference. Only things I really changed from the PAMAC listing is the .desktop file, so that way the description is in English instead of Spanish or Portuguese. I have a really hard time distinguishing between those languages. Please don't be offended. And I updated the icon too, so that way it's the most recent looking icon. Now, a few hours before recording this video, I was having issues launching this, and that was because of the font cache. The font cache was all effed up, and I had to, of course, clear out the cache and refresh it. But after just a quick refresh of the font cache, it now launches like new. So if you don't know what PhotoGIMP is, it's essentially GIMP, but a lot of the UI and many of the shortcuts are remapped, so that way it's a lot more familiar with Photoshop users. And this really helps me in particular because I've been using Photoshop for the past 4 to 5 years. It's because of the fact that I've used Photoshop for such a long time now that I've grown accustomed to Photoshop's UI and many of the shortcuts that I use to make thumbnails. And usually when I make videos, I always create the thumbnail last, but for this video, I actually created the thumbnail in advance. So I'm gonna open my most recent project. So this is the thumbnail that you probably have seen before clicking this video. And when making this thumbnail, I actually didn't struggle too much with it. Yes, there were some inconveniences, such as not being able to double-click on a layer and be able to quickly access some effects such as stroking or outer glow or a drop shadow. Yes, it is storming. It's gonna be storming soon. But I realized that with a stroke, I could just quickly get around that by obviously making a selection to alpha. And what I could do is select grow, and then I just determine like how many pixels I want the stroke to be. I grow the selection, and then I create a separate layer under the layer that I want to apply the stroke to, and then I use the paint bucket tool and of course fill in the stroke there. And that basically is a way to recreate a stroke. And a lot of the shortcuts are similar to Photoshop. Instead of Control-D duplicating a project and making it as a separate project, I can press Control-D and it obviously removes the marching ants. And it honestly just feels so much simpler to remove a selection. And the point of PhotoGIMP is that it's meant to be for Photoshop users who are transitioning over to GIMP. And honestly, it's a really good piece of software. I really wish more people were to be focusing on PhotoGIMP as a way for Photoshop users to transition over to GIMP. Because I'm gonna admit, as a Photoshop user myself, it is really difficult to learn GIMP. The UI, the shortcuts, the overall features are completely different from Photoshop. It's because of this that I have a really hard time using normal GIMP. But because of this PhotoGIMP application, I at least can work with it enough to actually be able to create some of the thumbnails that I could easily make with Photoshop. This obviously just being my first example, but I'm glad that I'll be able to continue making more thumbnails down the line. If I were to be someone who were more specialized in drawing and all that sort of stuff, I would obviously use an application like Krita or Paint Tool Sai, because those two are programs that are more meant for people who actually draw and stuff. I actually now want to talk about some driver support, like for devices such as this drawing tablet I have right here. Now, to be honest, I actually was not expecting for this drawing tablet to work at all in Manjaro. When you plug this device into your computer as a Windows user, you don't get the drivers from this device by default. You have to manually install the drivers from the website. And of course, you download something called the Wacom Center or something, and honestly, it just becomes a huge annoyance whenever I start up Windows every time, because it just launches in front of my face, prompting me for updates and wanting me to unnecessarily restart my computer. But For Linux though, the drivers come out of the box. So here is my Wacom pen right here, and as you can see, I can use my Wacom tablet as per usual. I did not install any drivers from the internet at all. And in fact, I would argue that the Linux drivers for the drawing tablet are better than the Windows drivers. So let's fire up actual GIMP, not PhotoGIMP, for example. So I'm going to give you an example of one of the huge annoyances that I have to deal with when using this drawing tablet for Windows. One of the things that I really like about the Linux drivers is that when I make very slow drawings, it doesn't annoy me with this weird context menu that pops up because I barely move the mouse. Now, whenever I do this with something like Photoshop, for example, it always would assume that I'm trying to open up a context menu when I do minuscule movements, and it honestly just annoys me to all hell, and I really don't enjoy using it. But it doesn't seem to be an actual problem when I use it for Linux. So I could easily make more subtle drawing movements without having some weird menu opening up every time. So that is honestly a huge win for me, so I can more easily draw on Linux than I do on Windows. It works right off the bat. So when I try using my drawing tablet for programs on my browser, it actually does not work right off the bat. What happens as a result is I have to enable some weird browser settings in order for the drawing tablet to work properly. But it seems like this works right out of the box. For another device that I want to plug in on, I want to talk about a game that I've mentioned in my previous Linux video, and that is a game called Roblox. Now, in my previous Roblox video, I said that I wouldn't regularly play Roblox on Linux because there are a few incompatibility issues, such as my mouse getting stuck on the screen whenever I hold right click or go in first person. A lot of people have left comments on the video saying that there is a community patch for this problem, and if I go to the Grape Juice server, I will be able to easily find this community patch and put it to my wine so that way I can play Roblox properly. But I've actually found another workaround to this problem. And in order to work around this problem, you have to use a controller. Now, I actually was out with my friends one day, and I actually decided to splurge about $40 on a wired controller because my previous Xbox 360 wired controller unfortunately stopped working because the wires were all messed up. When I actually play a Roblox game on Linux, it actually works. So here I am in a Roblox game. This is Natural Disaster Survival. So of course, there is this weird glitch when playing Roblox for the first time after a boot up that for some reason the controller isn't being recognized. But fortunately, just a simple disconnect and reconnect fixes this issue. Now it works. So I can easily look around all I want, I can move around all I want, jump, use tools and all that sort of stuff with just an Xbox controller, which is kind of funny because this is a Microsoft product, but I'm able to easily use an Xbox controller to move and look around in Roblox with no problems on Linux. Of course, I don't have to deal with the mouse stuck issue because it's a non-issue with a controller. Because when you use a controller on Linux, you actually do not use... the mouse is actually stuck on the screen by default. It's clear that someone is trying to chase me and giving me the virus, but obviously miserably failed. Now, this does have a downside to it, because if I want to play a Roblox game on Linux without problems, that Roblox game needs to have controller support. If a game does not have full support for an Xbox controller, for example, I will not be able to play that Roblox game on Linux. But fortunately, for the most part, I can actually play most Roblox games using an Xbox controller. And this allows me to play on Roblox for Linux quite easily. I'm still playing Roblox for Linux on an alt account because, again, I still don't trust the Grape Juice project just yet. To the point where I will play Roblox on my main account. But I did splurge a little bit of Robux onto this account so that way I could give this avatar a little bit of a makeover. So she obviously doesn't look like a default character. So after a few minutes of just playing this game and letting the whole map load, I'm about to show you one of the biggest shortcomings of playing Roblox on Linux. Because, as I said in my previous video, Roblox does not have native Linux support. So if you do want to play Roblox on Linux, you will have to use Wine along with the Grape Juice project in order to be able to play Roblox. Now, for the most part, with the controller, it actually works as if you were playing Roblox on Windows. But when it comes to the more intensive games, this is where we start to run into problems. So I just pressed Shift F5 to give us the FPS that this Roblox client is running on right now. So when I look at any part of the map that is not too intense, I get a perfect 60 frames per second. But when I start looking at the more intense map, you notice that the FPS starts to drop tremendously. We are now running this game at less than 20 FPS, which means that there is definitely noticeable lag that is going on here. This is only just one example of a game where this sort of lag happens. Any Roblox game that has more intense graphics usage will result in these random frame drops happening. Unfortunately, there's nothing I really can do about it because it is a Wine limitation. Wine is trying its best to, of course, make this game run as smoothly as possible. Graphics are getting quite intense on this game, and I don't have a top-of-the-line graphics card or CPU. I'm not able to run this game at a full 60 FPS. So here I am, I'm literally playing the exact same Roblox game, but this time I'm on Windows, not Linux. So literally nothing has changed except for the operating system. Same hardware, same game, same graphics settings and everything. The only difference is that I am playing this on Windows and not Linux, so I am running this natively. And as you can see, even when I look at the very part-intense map, I still maintain a full 60 FPS, as opposed to that huge FPS cut that we were seeing when I was playing the game on Linux. And it's because of this that I am still able to play the game without any problems. And I can obviously play this game a lot more responsively because the game still runs buttery smooth. Just because you can run a program on Wine doesn't mean that you're going to get the same flawless experience as opposed to running it natively on Windows. Speaking of gaming, I've actually been branching out a lot of my gaming onto Linux. Here I am, I'm playing a game that actually has native Linux support. I'm able to play this game at a smooth 60 frames per second without any problems. Now granted, Portal is a little bit of an older game, so obviously it doesn't have the most up-to-date graphics here. But overall, the main takeaway of this is that I am able to play even a game like Portal natively on Linux without any problems. I've enabled Steam Proton to work with all games. So for example, a game called Townscaper. This game does not have native Linux support. But let's go ahead and launch it anyways, because it's going to run under Steam Proton. So playing Townscaper with a controller is a bit annoying, so I will have to use mouse and keyboard for this. But yeah, I'm able to easily play a game that otherwise would not be capable of running on Linux perfectly with Steam Proton. But one other thing that I've also started doing on Linux is, of course, some of my schoolwork. Now, of course, I don't really have a whole lot of huge assignments to work on right now other than a presentation. But, of course, I can't demonstrate Linux software because I'm obviously using Google Slides. But I actually went out of my way and decided to install LibreOffice. Now, if you don't know what LibreOffice is, it's essentially the Linux equivalent to Microsoft Office, because Microsoft Office does not run on Linux. There is another Linux alternative as well called OpenOffice, but I think LibreOffice is the more recommended option for Office software on Linux. But I've actually done a few of my assignments using LibreOffice Writer, for example. Here's one of my homework assignments that I've had to do a few weeks ago. So this isn't violating academic integrity, hopefully, because this is a homework assignment that you cannot do anymore. But I was able to do all of my homework assignments perfectly fine with LibreOffice. Now, of course, I did install Microsoft Fonts just to make sure that when I do export it as a docx, Microsoft Word or Google Drive will be able to read the file just fine. As for doing any sort of programming, I obviously use Vim. So, Vim is something that I do, in fact, use if I do want to do any quick text editing, because, of course, it's a terminal solution, and I know there is, again, another huge debacle over using Vim in Emacs, but obviously, I've been introduced to Vim, so I'm more of a Vim person than an Emacs person. I still have to learn some of the shortcuts and some of the functionality of using Vim, but so far, I'm able to use it quite fine. I could easily edit code and all that sort of stuff. It has syntax highlighting and all that wonderful stuff, and I could easily just quit by just doing that. Hey folks, so today is the next day, and I am recording the next day because when I was editing the video, I realized that I forgot to mention how my video editing experience is going with Linux so far. And I am running into a huge dilemma so far with video editing upon Linux. So, if you don't know, I like editing my videos in DaVinci Resolve, but DaVinci Resolve has very limited codec support on Linux as opposed to DaVinci Resolve for Windows. And it's because of this limited codec support that I've been having a huge problem trying to edit videos on DaVinci Resolve as opposed to editing videos on Windows. Now, there is a method of trying to get your videos to be compatible with DaVinci Resolve for Linux, and one of the methods of doing this is writing a bash script that uses FFmpeg to transcode videos to use codecs that DaVinci Resolve for Linux will recognize. So, let me find the bash script I wrote real quick. Alright, so here is my bash script, at least the progress that I've made with this bash script so far. So, I think this is the farthest progress I've made in terms of writing my own bash script. I know there's like a lot of generic tutorials online showing you like some basic bash scripts on how to transcode videos to using codecs that DaVinci Resolve for Linux will support. But I honestly wasn't a huge fan of many of the bash scripts that a lot of these online tutorials provided because they really weren't idiot-proof in terms of design. So I decided to put some of my bash knowledge to use, and I actually decided to write a bash script myself to try and convert videos over to those compatible codecs. So the meat and bones of this entire bash script is with this one line right here. So as you can see, this command runs ffmpeg to take in a video file in the same directory as the current script is located in. And it performs a lot of these operations that I personally prefer a lot more over how a lot of the online tutorials do it. So one huge difference that I do that the online tutorials don't do is I use these two flags. Now, the reason why I use these two flags is when I record my videos, I use multiple audio tracks. And the main reason why I use multiple audio tracks for my videos is that it allows me to have more control over individual audio levels. So, for example, if the desktop audio is too loud and it's overpowering my commentary, I could just simply go to that audio track and lower the volume so that way my voice is more prevalent. And a lot of online tutorials do not account for this, so I did have to look up a little flag that does account for preserving those audio tracks and video tracks. So the audio codec is actually not a problem at all. I figured out that this audio codec seems to work the best with DaVinci Resolve. DaVinci Resolve can definitely read this audio codec right here without a problem. The hugest problem that I've ran into when trying to transcode my videos is with the video codecs. And this is where I honestly was struggling here. I was experimenting with several different video codecs. I was using MJPEG, LibXvid, etc, etc. But whenever I did manage to transcode a video to a format that DaVinci Resolve could recognize, it made the video look extremely compressed. So I'm going to give you a reference of what happens when I use FFmpeg to transcode a video. So for reference, this is the original MKV file that I recorded directly from OBS. So this is the file that gets directly outputted when using
I really think that's
OBS.
all that there really is to
so,
show when it
yes, the
comes
video is a little
to
blurry, but
game
that's just
drawing.
because of my horrible webcam quality. But as you can see, it was able to preserve the video in its best quality, and it was able to preserve the audio, which is to be expected. So it didn't preserve the full name of the file. I think that's a bug with my bash script, so I do need to figure out how to fix that. But let me, so this is the exact same video that I just showed you, but this is supposed to be a transcoded version with FFmpeg to try and work with DaVinci Resolve. I don't have the audio working, but that's because I have to switch audio tracks because, again, I use multiple audio tracks for recording. But as you can see, when you look at the video,
I really think that's all that there really is.
You can see that the video looks insanely compressed. Like, you could tell there's extreme compression that is happening here. Like, it is painfully obvious to see that there is obvious compression with this video, and it's because of this that I haven't been able to figure out an actual solution to try and transcode my videos to work with DaVinci Resolve for Linux. If anybody has been able to figure out which video codecs can preserve the video quality, but it could still be opened and like decoded and encoded by DaVinci Resolve for Linux, please leave a comment down below, because I would honestly be really happy to know that information. And once I do manage to patch up some of the bugs in this video and probably add some additional functionality, such as being able to drag and drop video files and then being able to just mass produce, mass transcode videos with just a simple drag and drop, I could probably I can probably distribute the full bash script that I have written here so that way you can use it for yourself. The only other way that you could actually get the proper video codec support for DaVinci Resolve for Linux is if you were to buy DaVinci Resolve Studio, which means you have to pay for the actual program, and that costs a few $100s, and as much as I love using DaVinci Resolve, I just do not have the money yet to be able to afford the full version of DaVinci Resolve. It's because of all of this that I am still continuing to edit my videos in Windows as of right now, because, of course, DaVinci Resolve on Windows has way better codec support than DaVinci Resolve on Linux. But I noticed that a lot of other Linux users tend to use Kdenlive. Now, if you don't know what Kdenlive is, it's pretty much an open source and free version video editor that a lot of Linux users use. I only like looked around the Kdenlive interface so far, and I will say that this is definitely a program that definitely will need to take some learning to do a lot of the same things that you could do in a program like Premiere Pro or DaVinci Resolve. Before I ever do decide to use Kden Live to make YouTube videos, I'm probably going to be using Kden Live to edit a few personal videos of mine, and probably not going to upload them to YouTube at all. So just so that way I can get a feel of what using Kden Live is like before I ever do decide to use Kden Live to make YouTube videos. But that's my stance on Kden Live right now. And that's my entire stance of video editing in general. So again, video editing is probably one of the only things that I will still go to Windows for. Now, I think that should be everything covered now. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to be notified for any future upload that I make to this channel. This is Game Webcam, and take care.